Hey guys, welcome to another episode of All Bass Creations, effects, tutorials, demos, and review. So today we're going to talk a little bit about using real amps versus amp modelers. And one of the biggest benefits, hit that like button if you haven't already. But one of the biggest benefits of having amp models is that I can just simply change them without switching the actual physical device. So, say I wanted to go from this color box over here. It's a color box over here on the desk. And down here on the floor, I have an Ampeg SGT, a Gensler Magellan, Aguilar AG preamp, things like that. Those pedals do sound amazing. And, but live, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference between the two. Even in the studio, I would argue, once the record is finished and everything, it's going to be hard for somebody to distinguish between these. Like, I use the ToneX 1. The ToneX 1 stuff is amazing. It replicates I don't know why I can't talk today. It duplicates things perfectly. Like it just gets your settings right, and then you always have that capture of that setting the exact way you want it. What's going on, folks? Appreciate you stopping by, chiming in. I'm doing great. How about you? Hope everybody having a great day. You know, everybody chime in where they from and where they hang. You know, what you got going on today. I appreciate all y'all. Yeah, I would. You know, it'd be kind of hard to have the name the Bass Negus if I didn't do music. You know, that's kind of kind of a little slightly strange question. Ask somebody holding a bass guitar. But anyway, you know, switching between all those different devices would be a hassle, and carrying all of them would be a hassle. They are like, you know, sizable pedals compared to a ToneX One or something of that nature. You know, I'm not endorsed by any of these companies, so I don't want it to make it seem. I don't want you guys to think I'm endorsed by IK Multimedia. Not necessarily. You know, I do. I just like the product itself. You know, and that's why I bought my ToneX and stuff myself. So you know, that's one of the main reasons I bought it myself, you know, so I can give you guys honest reviews of it. And I have to say, it amazes me how good it sounds. Like that's a color box running into a Ampeg SGT tone model, right? Over on the pedal board. Let's switch to the pedal board view here. So it's got that color, it got that firmness from the color box in there. And it also has that, like, that Ampeg sound in there as well. So you really get that Ampeg. Compared to this is the color box running into the Gensler Magellan, right? So you can just do, you know, it just two different sounds. Compared to and even though they both have a similar characteristic from the color box in there and the preamp on my bass and my actual fingers and what I'm playing, like that slight variation of having those two different preamps changing because I had the color box when I was doing that EQ the same when I was doing both batches of those tone models, and it captured that color box saturation and firmness in there while still retaining the color and the tonality of the actual physical preamps themselves. You know, you running an analog preamp into another analog preamp, and it's able to get that sound. You know, even with the finger style. Compared to the Ampeg, has that much more of a vintage, spanky sound to it, you know? And having those different preamps available to me in different combinations that I don't have to, every time I take my pedal board out, I gotta now, you know, turn all the knobs and put it back together and this and that. You know, it's really nice to have different preamps just available immediately to you, So I would say, if you guys haven't already, check out some of the different things that you can do with the amp modelers today. Even things like moving away from that, we can come over to something like the MS-60B Plus, and that also has amp models. Let's see what they're talking about. Let's see what kind of sound we can get from this. No cabinet. Turn that cab off. Give it a little bass on there. Little cut right there, a little boost there. And something like the MS-60B Plus, you can also add like that 1073 preamp sound, because it does have a 1073 emulation in there as well. So you can take this, get something very similar to what I just did on the ToneX with the color box and the Ampeg SGT. So let's do that. We'll add a 1073 pre in here. Go over to the preamp section. Nice 1073. And we'll probably boost a little bit on here around 16K. Well, no, not 16K. 1.6K. So now I can get that similar to what we were doing with the ToneX. Now we can get it with the MS-60B. Oh, sorry, let me make sure this camera's still straight. Oh, come on, Reggie. All right, be good. For the most part. Just a little bit. There we go. So now you get that similar tonality. Let's check it out. And something like the MS-60B Plus, you also have the option of adding, a few other effects in there as well. Of course, the ToneX one has modulations, delays, reverb, and you also have compressors, noise gate. You got a noise gate in there as well, and EQ. So, but in here, in the MS-60B Plus, you have the amp models, you got preamp models, you got modulations, delays, distortions, reverbs, and like synth effects in there as well. So something like an MS-60B, if you're just getting into the effects game, would actually be perfect, because you don't have to spend a lot of money on a unit that, you just getting into effects, and you get all the effects all the different type of effects that there are for us, or that we widely use with us. So you got access to all that stuff in one pedal. And so let's put the I like the 160 compressor on here. Put that threshold around 14. We actually gonna do like let's do a 2 to 1 soft knee. So you can easily get that. Yeah. All right, we good. Trying to make sure we not having no troubles again. Shout out to Streamlabs. Streamlabs is on their game, folks. When I say you message them about a problem of you streaming, or you having a problem streaming, I'm not endorsed by Streamlabs either. I just use their product, and it's solid. You know, it's been very solid, and it's definitely been helping me grow my community. So, you know, they respond. Go ahead. But all right, so yeah, you can go with something like that, or you can have something like this in the ToneX. But yeah, so yeah, I'm not even sure what that is. So I'm not really sure what that is. I'm guessing that's a pedal that you asking about there. And what's going on, by the way? Appreciate you stopping by. You know, I love seeing my usual folks in here. You know, I appreciate y'all a lot. You know, with your continued support and just always stopping by, checking me out. Thank you. You know, really appreciate it a lot. And if you haven't already, hit that like button wherever you are. You know, feel free to share it to folks and all that good stuff. Oh yeah, I don't even need no add-on buttons for mine. I actually control my MS-60B when I want to through MIDI. I use the USB port. Same here. Same thing with the Zoom MS-70 CDR plus. All that on my when I run my setup. Down here on the floor is a MIDI captain, which was running into a CME H2 MIDI Pro, and the H2 MIDI Pro distributes MIDI throughout my board. Set all my presets up in the MIDI captain, and I never actually touch my multi stomps when I'm gigging or using the MIDI. No, I don't use my feet at home, but on the gig, I pretty much exclusively use my feet when I'm gigging. My pedal boards go on the floor when I'm gigging. They're up here, so when I'm editing, I don't need to get to them as quick at home. but it's really hard on your back bending down on the floor trying to create all these different sounds. So I just put them on keyboard. These are just $20 keyboard stands off of Amazon, and I use them to hold up my pedal boards. But listen, let's see if we can get these closer. Because I know it's a lot of MS-60B plus users that follow me on here, Zoom users. You can also do this on the Zoom B6. On the B6, it's going to be even better. This is going to sound better. It's twice the sound sample rate of the MS-60B plus. That's 60B MS-60B plus running 44.1 kilohertz. That's running 88.2 kilohertz. So a lot more information is available, and the clarity is like pristine on the B6. So don't be fooled that you see a lot of the same effects. They sound better on the B6 than they do the MS-60B plus. So even oh yeah, I don't use them on stream at all. It's too one, it's harder for y'all to see the pedals when they're on the floor, and it just looks better on camera for you guys, and it's a better presentation. And like I said, it's a lot easier editing pedals, presets, and stuff from up here than on the floor. So definitely, when you set up your stuff at home, try setting your pedals up so you can get to them a little easier. It'll definitely, your back could thank me. But yeah, I always, I avoid the tap dancing thing, and a lot of times, like I said, on the floor there's a MIDI captain that switches everything for me for the most part. But so as you can hear, of course those are two different things. Let me see. I actually have the SVT side of those color box settings running into the Ampeg SGT with the SVT button engaged. So I'm gonna compare that to the MS-60B plus. See, you can get them to sound pretty close. That's actually pretty close there. And that's just the MS-60B plus. I don't know why this thing keeps doing that. Let me pull that in there. But that's the MS-60B plus running the 1073 pre into the Ampeg SVT. And as you can hear, that sounds really close to each other. The ToneX version of my color box running into the Ampeg SGT with the SVT button engaged. While, you know, just those two pedals together, that's like $750 worth of pedals that you can emulate just with a MS-60B plus or a ToneX one. And you're going to get very tight bass sound, from either one. And the MS-60B plus still also you can mix in the cabinet if you wanted to. So here's all cabinet. So as you can even hear there, that cabinet makes a difference. And you can do the same thing with the ToneX one, as well. So, these types of pedals, they really can save you a ton of money, especially if you're new to effects. I can't stress to you enough, do not give yourself too many options because you will confuse yourself. You're just learning a lot of new terminology. You're just learning what these different sounds are. It takes a while to be able to even hear compression properly and, learn how to properly EQ your stuff and all this other stuff, right? Why not if you're just getting in the game, MS-60B Plus is going to do you just fine. And like I said, you're going to have a variety of modulations, delays, reverbs, noise gates. You even got a few synthesizers in there. And you got, all the really nice compressors and EQs that really sound good. And, I just can't stress that enough. For the money, MS-60B Plus is not being even touched right now. And I know they got a lot of little digital pedals that's out right now, but a lot of when it comes to the bass stuff, it's not as solid as the Zoom stuff be. You know what I'm saying? And that's just at the price point, Yes, if you spend more money, I'm sure that dark glass anagram is better than the MS-60B Plus. I'm sure, I'm sure it's got more stuff in there than the Zoom B6, I'm sure, but it's twice the price of a Zoom B6. You know what I'm saying? So it should. You got to keep everything in perspective. And a Zoom B6, you're going to get tremendous amp models and everything else in there. A lot of that extra routing, a lot of the extra selling points they giving y'all, most basses are not even going to use half of that crap. And I'm just being honest. And it's not crap like that. When I say crap, I just mean stuff. We don't use all that on the gig. Even when I take this board here, I take this whole board, and a lot of times, sorry about that. This is two separate boards if you're not familiar with the channel. So most of the time I'm using Empress compressor into my ToneX, into my Atlas compressor, and on out the door to the canvas line isolator. That's my main bass signal path. Granted, I do have a color box and like, the Gensler Magellan or the Color Box and the Ampeg SGT. Mind you, these packs will be on the Patreon. They'll be available to you. So all the sounds you're hearing from the ToneX, you'll actually be able to download. And the sounds, I actually have a pack for the MS-60B Plus too on there as well. So, all these sounds that you like to hear are going to be on there. Now, what I will say, you don't want to give yourself, you don't want to give, I forgot the name of the term, but it's like when you have too many options, it actually, throws you off because it paralyzes you because it's harder to make decisions. When you have less options, you have to be more creative with them because there's fewer things. So, and this is coming from somebody that's got all these pedals, right? But I didn't buy all these pedals at once. I bought all these pedals at different times, and I took a lot of time, to learn each pedal. I think that's super important when you're dealing with pedals, in general, any musical gear. I think it's important to spend some time with it, really learn it before you just, move on to the next thing. And I understand we always trying to find a particular sound or this or that, but, go into things open-minded and, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Like even this Ampeg, I can get this. If I wanted to get it brighter, I could. It's got the Ultra in there as well. You mean to tell me this is my bass dry. MS-60B Plus. So it's $120 to get you in the game. Now, I will say, if you want to just go ahead and step up your amp game right off the bat, go ahead and get you a ToneX 1, right? But it's going to be more software-based. The MS-60B does have an app for your iPhone and your iPad, and you can edit it that way, or you can edit it directly on the pedal. Has this nice big screen here, and you can see everything you need to see there, change everything you need to change there. Compared to the ToneX 1, you're going to have to go into the software to get to some of the deeper parameters. But for the most part, on stage, I don't need access to all parameters, hardly any. Like, by the time I get to the stage, I've already dialed in my sounds. I think this is important for a lot of people too. Dial in your sounds. Like, so you put on some nice headphones, some good in-ear monitors or something. Dial those sounds in so when you get to the gig, you're not trying to fiddle around. You shouldn't be fiddling around with parameters too much while you're playing. Maybe a little volume here or there, but a little EQing on your bass, but don't be fiddling around with too much on stage. I try to keep this to a few different preamps at a time, my ToneX 1. So I usually press the alt and the bypass switch at the same time, and I leave it in this like selector mode. I forgot what this mode is called, but gives you the option of having 3 different preamps. So get y'all to hear the difference between. So all of those have different personalities. You don't want to drive your sound people crazy switching up. They have different weight too. That's that TC Electronic BH500, the original, when it was in Denmark. Boy, what you know about that? Oh, that thing's fire. I sold it to the church I work at, and I use it every Sunday. It's amazing, amazing gear. Back then, from the Denmark crew of TC Electronic. But yeah, the amp modelers are crazy. You even have the DIs in something like the multi stomp. Mind you, you can have all those DIs types in your ToneX One. If you get the new ToneX One bass signature bass collection, oh, I think you'll be good. Get that, and then you can, if you get my packs. That's what you really need. Get these joints with that color box and all that in there. So, it's a thing of this little pedal, ToneX One, is hard to beat in terms of amp models. But the Zoom stuff is a nice second in terms of price. You know what I'm saying? No, you won't get no modeling on the Zoom stuff, but you will also get so many other effects that'll be useful. The choruses are really nice in there, while the ToneX One is mostly just one chorus, one flanger, one tremolo, just one of each of the modulations, 2 types of delays, and a few types of reverbs. It depends on what you want. Like, you can get an MS-60B and a ToneX One, and you got you a killer little rig there. Compared to, I would have to carry these pedals. As much as I love these preamps, right? They're massive. The analog preamps are huge. So look at them in size comparison to other pedals. They're just absolutely take up so much space. Same thing with the color box. The color box ain't too much smaller than the SGT. So definitely helps to have something as small as a ToneX One carrying all of that gear, including things like, if you go on to the ToneNet, you can get a bunch of good preamps and stuff on there as well. Let me see what we got here. Yeah, the pedal cost me quite a bit of money. It's not cheap being in the pedal game for sure. And I not just cost you money, it costs you time. I've had to solder each and every one of these single cables. Every single one of them I've soldered. And the audio cables, I used the stock power cables with it, but that came with each power unit. And what you can't see underneath is these are powered. This is powered by one True Tone CS12. This board is powered by CS12 and an MXR ISO brick. So, I use 2 on this one just for the power draw, and, it just keeps my sound nice and clean. I will say, don't be afraid to spend a little money on the power supplies, guys. Don't go cheap on the power supplies. That is not the place to go cheap on a pedal board. Go cheap on, I would rather you, not me. This will help you make your pedal board usable. You know what I'm saying? Where it's not just making a bunch of noise all the time. That I would rather, any sound engineer is going to rather you have a quiet signal and just like a slightly less expensive pedal, to run it through, than to have it dirty and you got some, you got a cheap power supply with an expensive pedal. That don't really work out too well, especially with distortions and things like that. It really makes it sound, it makes it unusable. You know what I'm saying? So let me turn this back. I always got to keep this camera straight. But if you haven't already, hit that like button. I thank y'all for hanging out with me. Let's check out some more. So then I could bring in something like an Aguilar, color box running into the Aguilar. AG, which none of the other pedals, none of the pedals come with, like some of these newer amps, like the Aguilar AG preamp. A lot of them come with like the Aguilar Tone Hammer emulations, or the DB750, which the new signature bass collection does include. Like I said, if you're gonna get a ToneX one now, get the signature bass collection, because it's actually gonna come with really, really good bass amps. And when you want something a little funky, you know what I'm saying, something a little bit more crafted by somebody, by your boy, you know what I'm saying, you can go to my joint. I got all the 11 different preamp packs available. And I also have these new packs I'm putting out. Like you're listening to some of them now, the Ampeg and the Color Box, and the combination packs. So go from that Ampeg SVT with the Color Box running into it. B15. Color Box into the gens being shuttled. So you're getting a little bit of that tube action in there as well. So, this, I can't recommend the MS-60B Plus or the ToneX One enough to bass players. There are two pedals that really are being overlooked. Well, the ToneX One, I can't say it's been over. A lot of bassists haven't gotten into it. Like it will, all your amps at the crib, you know what I'm saying, you just get it together there. You know what I'm saying? You put all your amps into that pedal, versus being, the MS-60B Plus, you're kind of stuck with whatever is in there and whatever they decide to add later on. The ToneX One is going to allow you to essentially just have unlimited amp models, like from IK Multimedia, from different creators like myself. You got me. I don't know. I don't know if any other. I don't know. I'm sure there's other bassists that are doing tone model packs too. But for the ToneX series pedals and software. But I know that I spent a lot of time doing mine. So they all sound good, and I tested them all, used them all on gigs, all that stuff. So you don't even got to worry about trying to get all the pedals. That's what I love about it. This is crazy. From this to something that fits in the size of your palm of your hand, doesn't even take up the whole palm. That's crazy. And yes, I do plan on getting the MXR bass synth. They're just sold out everywhere. And one of the channel subscribers has already put in towards the MXR bass synth fund. As you know, we are funded by the people for the people. And right now, the only person generally is me. But you guys definitely help out with the Patreon. I love my Patreon subscribers. Thank you. And you guys help out just watching and supporting. It makes a huge difference, you know what I'm saying, when I go to do it. But Neo Lover 23 actually got me about halfway to the MXR pedal, So I appreciate you guys, as well as some other ones that's been doing super chats. You can do super chats, cash apps, whatever. And this just helps me get pedal reviews done. Now, if you want a certain pedal reviewed in particular, and you want it reviewed right now, you can always send me half of the money. I'll put up the other half. I'll get a review done. If it's got a pack, I'll create a pack for it and send it to you. So the pack, not the pedal. Pedal staying with me. But I'll do what you want me to do when you want me to do it if you pay me. That's typically how I go, you know. But you guys have been just amazing in general, just really supportive. And they respond like amps too. And just so we are just so we are clear, you can always come back over here on this MS-60B Plus. You still got other amp models. You got an AG, you got a DB750 on here as well. All these are the color box running into the, not the color box, the 1073 pre on there. SWR. EBS. Mini Mark bass, which is pretty much just the filters. No cabinet. Take that cabinet off. Change the shape. That's the little Mark bass on them, huh? So that's it. This little pedal got some nastiness to it. You know what I'm saying? Don't sleep on the MS-60B Plus because it's only $120. Huh? What sense does that make? You know? Now I will say this: if you're gonna get a ToneX one, you might want to get a few other little things to go with that. Now, can you do it all in there? Yeah. But MS-60B Plus, you really can do it all, but the amp models are nowhere, they're not, I'm not gonna say nowhere near, they aren't as good as the ToneX ones. And that goes for most of the amp models out. Like, I prefer the ToneX to the Quad Cortex, to the Kemper, to all of those. I do, y'all kind of got my interest with this dark glass anagram, but I don't see those amp models being better than the ToneX ones. And that's mostly what I need with a all-in-one multi-effects unit. I need those amp models to be together. Like, but to each his own. So, now let's talk about real amps. Some of the benefits. Of course, we've all been to the gig where the sound guy said you don't need your amp. Then halfway through the gig, not even halfway, you've never felt the bass on stage and it just didn't feel right. A real bass amp still makes things feel together. And I just like the way a real bass amp sounds in a room. I think it really is a part of the show. Like in terms of the way that sound comes out of those speakers and shapes it and everything else is different than what the PA and everything else does. So, I really do think if you take something like a Fender Bassman Neo 115, great recording cabinet, great for live stuff as well. There people just say you could just EQ it differently. It's not gonna sound like that. That cabinet has a very particular sound, very clean, but it shapes it perfectly in my opinion. Now, you got things like the Harkey back here and the Jens Benz 212s back there. Those are amazing. But all of those are like 40 pounds. You know what I'm saying? All my cabinets are 40 pounds or less. I don't do heavy cabinets. I don't do heavy heads anymore. All my heads are like under 8 pounds. Like they might be, I think that Jens Benz might be like 6 or 7. So I use mostly lightweight gear now anyway for amps. So it's not like amps are back in the day where it was really difficult to carry around amps. A lot of the mark-based stuff is so light you can just lift it with one hand. So, is it worth not feeling the bass in the room the way you want to, the way you used to? Because let's be real, the main part of it is what we're used to, what we like to feel and hear. We're used to having a bass amp, like we just are. So, I know they're trying to take all the amps out of everything, but I still bring my amp. And yes, I try to be reasonable and work with the sound team to ensure that I'm not just blasting or, I'm not over top of everybody. I literally check in, ask, hey, do I need to come down? Are we good? Rada. If they want me to come down too much, I'll be like, hey, that's a lot. There's a lot. I need to hear something out of there. So, it's like finding that perfect balance sometimes with working with different people. You can't always just have your exact way. Some situations you're not going to be able to have an amp. It's just what it is. And these amp modelers definitely get you the sound you want. And, so I would say when it comes to amp modelers versus the real ones, it really boils down to what situations is. I'll actually use both at the same time. So I use my ToneX 1 as my preamp sound, and I bypass usually whatever physical bass amp head I'm using. I bypass that and run into the return of the effects loop or the power amp in. And I use the ToneX 1 literally to be my preamp for that cabinet. And I can switch preamps and setups from there. I'm not switching cabinets, and I'm not muddying things up by running it through a third preamp, running it through the front of a bass amp either. So you gotta keep all that stuff in mind. Also, I have the cabinet simulations turned off on the ToneX 1 globally. So they all have IRs on the presets, but I just go into the settings and I turn off them globally so I can just use them when I feel like it. And if there's no amp, I can add the IR or the cabinet simulation. Oh, and if I do have an amp, I can then take off the cabinet simulation, just run my basically run into this canvas line isolator. I send that to the house from there, and then the rest of that signal I send to the amp. So, it's not like these things have to be mutually exclusive. You can use gear together and make it work together. It just depends on your preference. Some people are going to want to take this because this is like a lightweight amp. It just doesn't have power to it. But this joint's heavy. It's a brick. It's solid. It just depends on how much gear you want to take. And you still have to spend time with these amp emulators or amp modelers. You got to spend time with them the same way you spend it with an amp, like or another preamp pedal. You know what I'm saying? You got to treat each capture like it's an actual amp. You do have I know my presets come with the EQ setup already, so you'll be able to change things that you might want to change on there. bass. Oh, I can add some. So it just depends on what you need and what you like. But I would say look at each thing as its own thing. MS-60B plus, as a beginner pedal, or not even just a beginner pedal, if you're gonna use the amp models, you need to spend some real time tweaking them, getting them to set up properly. So when you get on stage, you're not trying to fiddle with these little knobs and everything else. The ToneX, the tone model captures are pretty much what they are, except for if you want to add some compression or EQ in there, you can, like I just showed you. So I definitely think the amp modelers have come a long way, and I think they're going to continually just get better and better. Just the more the AI software can get this stuff done, the better. So I really don't see any reason not to get into the amp modelers. And it's really not about what's better. It's about having tools to do different jobs. If you need to go and run into a studio and just get it done, and all you got is a ToneX, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine, and you'll have your preamps. If you ran into a studio and you only had this, you'd be fine. So and this technically has a cabinet simulation in here, and it does some cabinet. This is kind of like an amp modeler as well, with the SGT circuit on here, models the B15 and the SVT. Ain't no tubes in here, so it's not a real B15 or a real SVT. So it's amp modeling, even though they have a analog side of the preamp by itself, just the regular SGT preamp. But this button is definitely somewhat of an amp model. And you also have built-in IRs, IR slots in this too. So, they come in different forms. If you want something that's more analog but gonna have the cabinets and, still gonna give you something, this is a good option, the SGT, and if you just need a DI, these are DIs, these type of amp modelers are kind of cool, because you're getting the analog and the digital, you're getting the speaker emulation, you're getting the DI, you're getting the headphone practice amp, and you can still go throughout. It's running on 9-volt, 500 milliamps, which is normal standard pedal stuff. And you even got auxiliary in stereo and mono with its own switch here. So, something like this, yes, is going to be $350 or $300, whatever these are running right now. But it's going to sound really good. And if you are into the analog stuff, but you want to still have a little bit of that digital magic in there, SGT DI is like that perfect combination between the two. Some people really like to have their knobs and their dials. You got a compressor on here as well. 3-band EQ. You can get grinding with this. You can get real dirty and nasty. But it's only going to be Ampeg sounds. 3 pretty much Ampeg preamp sounds. Versus you spend 120, you can get a bunch of different ones. They're not going to be as good. The SVT in here is not going to be as good as the SVT and the SGT. And now I can say that if I gave you a blind test between the SGT and the ToneX, you'd have a hard time picking out which one was the SGT. I guarantee you. I did it myself, and I couldn't tell the difference. Especially in a recording and situation. So, maybe save a little money on the preamp side of the game and get you the amp modelers instead of the analog version or something that models them. Quad Cortex, all that stuff. Like I said, my favorite is the ToneX. Sounds the best to me. But get something like that if you're one of those guys that's always going to want new amps or new models. Otherwise, if you get something like the B6 or the Helix or the HX Stomp, you have to wait for those companies to release new amp models. Compared to the ToneX, Quad Cortex, and the Kemper, things like that, that model, they allow you to pretty much have anything you want in that pedal in terms of though whatever is models, generally distortion pedals, preamps, EQs, things like that. Things that add saturation, pretty much. So always check out things before you just be like, oh, this ain't really it. The hard part is they all cost money, but it's music. You know what I'm saying? Music gear always cost a lot. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, that's the reason why a lot of people couldn't be musicians. It's very expensive. But if you're going to do it, get you something you like. That's the Aguilar thing. Got some that color box into the Aguilar. So, yeah, the best thing to do is find a setup that works for you, that's easy for you to set up, doesn't take a long time to set up, and is predictable. The ToneX, something like a ToneX or a MS-60B Plus are going to be predictable, especially when in the beginning, in the beginning, it's just really hard to focus on everything, the songs, being excited to be on stage. Now you adding in a bunch of effects and stuff. Like, you gotta make that transition smooth in adding in those effects, or else, I know a few people have run into complaints about using effects. Typically, you might be using them a little too heavy. If I'm using the chorus and it's not really like a synth sound, the chorus is there, but it's almost like it's not there. If I take it off, it's like, what happened to all this extra stuff that was just surrounding me? And that's a little extreme. Yeah, typically around there. Oh, sorry, guys. So the chorus, you using something like that a little lighter. When you're just playing regular stuff, if you want to use a chorus, what I'm saying? If you're playing something that's a little more experimental or a little bit more out there, a little more synthy, you can put on that heavier chorus. But, if you want to use effects, go for it. Just within reason, you know what I'm saying? Save the super experimental songs for sounds for where they make sense. I'm not saying don't do them. Notice, I never said don't do it. I said use them where it makes sense. Same thing with any pedal. If I'm playing something that needs that more direct bass sound and not this big wide bass sound, I'm not going to turn on the chorus. But something like a ballad, this chorus, long sustaining those, it just takes up so much space without being too, it spreads the sound out a little bit more. It just spreads it out around you versus very direct. Sometimes I feel like bass, electric bass is really in your face, punchy, direct, cutting, versus when you're on a ballad, you want to be able to like just be this big pillowy foundation at times. So, you know, the amp plays a huge part in that as well. So, yeah, definitely if you're thinking about checking out some amp modelers, definitely, check them out. I will say this and caution you, a lot of amp modelers, the majority of stuff that's going to be available is going to be guitar on it, unless it's bass specific. That's why I love the Zoom stuff, because not just their amps, all the amps are bass amps, every effect is stuff that is specifically tailored for bass. Reverb and delay, you don't need that tailored for bass. But all the EQs, the compressors, the amps, the cabinets, the modulations, everything is tailored towards bass. So try to get a unit like that, where stuff is tailored towards bass. And then for your experimental stuff, something like a MS-70 CDR Plus will do you just fine, which is this blue pedal there. That'll do you just fine, because it's going to give you a bunch of extra effects. Or something like a HX1, their reverbs and delays in there are really good. The Plethora X1 has an amazing array of modulations, delays, and reverbs that I like. So, these days, you don't have to be, travel heavy to be rolling nice on them. You know what I'm saying? And the amp models definitely help you do that. So, make sure you check out some amp modeler. Just try to like I said, make sure it's more bass specific. And if you're gonna get a ToneX one, just go ahead and get the ToneX Signature Bass Collection one. That way you have all the, you getting something that's more, has the bass amps already with it, along with a few other pieces of software that'll help as well. So, but the MS-60B Plus, if you want that wide variety of bass effects, that's not just amp models, MS-60B Plus is at a great price point. The Zoom B6 is also at a great price point, but it is, like I said, it's even bigger than this pedal. So, that's something you want to use more as a standalone unit versus as on a pedal board. You know what I'm saying? So I do have a Zoom B6 that I just take to church or take to when I'm doing musicals. I just leave it at the theater and set up all my patches in there, and I just leave it at that. That way every day I come in, I can just boop, 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 set up and quick to the point. But that's the other point of the amp modelers too. You got to come in and set up a bass cabinet, carry that joint in there, plug in all this extra stuff, then load it back in the car later on. Man, I can pack up my pedal board and be up out of there. So it's a trade-off, but I think if you just take some time and really think about what's important to you, tone, if every little nook and cranny of an amp being modeled isn't an issue for you, you know what I'm saying, and you just want something that sounds good, the MS-60B Plus ain't going to do you wrong. You know what I'm saying? Now, see what else we got here. What's going on, bro? Appreciate you. Well, the limiter and compressor don't add warmth to a tone. So those, unless it's like an actual tube type compression, like a LA2A. But typically a limiter is not coloring your tone, and most times a good compressor will color it somewhat, but not as much as you think. And not enough to say warming it up, you know what I'm saying? But if you already got a Gensler Magellan amp and in cab, you're doing pretty well, bro. You're doing pretty well. And things is not cheap. You know, I was thinking about getting those Gensler cabs. Them things expensive, boy. They're like $2,000 for a cab. But I'll show you the difference between. So what I had, let me see. I did a quick demonstration earlier of how the where's this dude? I did a quick demonstration of how you can run a 1073 pre on the MS-60B Plus, run that into a preamp, and it'll be similar to what I have on the ToneX. So right now on the ToneX is a color box running into the SGT DI on with the SVT circuit engaged. Versus the MS-60B. Let me see. Hopefully my settings are still there. Nope. I gotta set it up real quick because I changed it. Yeah, if you want some warmth to your tone, I would say on the MS-60B, do you have an MS-60B Plus? If you do, something that'll help you out is that 1073 pre. That's gonna add a nice little bit of warmth and form. It's not like a tube type of warmth. It's just it's like a 1073. You know, it just adds a little nice saturation, but doesn't overly color your sound the same way a color box doesn't. What's going on, folks? Appreciate you stopping by. All the usual suspects in the house now. So that's my bass by itself with the MS-60B Plus 1073 pre. You see how I just added just a little bit of that, you know what I'm saying? Just a little. It sounds just like a color box. I mean, it don't sound. It's they all trying to emulate a 1073 preamp, which is a Neve 1070, very expensive preamp. But this definitely, this 1073 pre on here, and if you want an even better one, if you have a Zoom B6 by chance, the one on the Zoom B6 is just phenomenal. Like I love it. It actually is. I did a shootout between that and the color box. The color box barely won. You know what I'm saying compared to it because it really does sound good. And it actually the AG Aguilar AG preamp actually gives you somewhat of a similar type of thing, not quite, but pretty similar. It just add a little bit of something. That's all you want. You know what I'm saying? When you talking about adding a little bit of warmth, you can't add but so much warmth to it um, before you start really changing the characteristic of its sound. And here's the one on the ToneX. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Think that it might have. I don't think it's no verb on there. Let me see. I can check. I think it's no verb. Shouldn't be no verb. ToneX MS-60B. And if I wanted to make this one heavier, I could. I got plenty of bass I can add on here. You know, complete overkill. Now it's starting to get a lot closer. I just need to bring that bass down just a smidge. This the hard part about matching them. Give me 1 second, guys. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Okay. You want to just wait? Because it's going to be, by the time you can, it's going to be, they can be, I have to go to bed around 8, 9 o'clock. I know, I did, I thought it would be a little earlier. Is Tuesday not an option at all? You sounded like you had something to do on Tuesday. tell them already? Okay. Okay. That'd be perfect. Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. That's perfect. I said that's perfect. Well, not after football. I gotta get them when I finish at Fame, like 8:30, and then I know. So I'll be over there sometime around 9. I know. I'm just letting you. I mean, I didn't know. I thought they got out a little earlier than that. All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just had to check on my kids. You know, can't leave the kids hanging. You know what I'm saying? You can do the kids. The children are the future. But you guys are awesome. But yeah, for the most part, just add just add something like that 1073 to what you got going on, and that'll give you that a little additional warmth. Another little effect on here to give you some nice warmth. Now, if you want like more distorted, or like getting into like heavier saturations, you got like this clear driver in here. The clear driver pre is also amazing. Like that's just the cleanest, clearest distortion. Let's see what we got here. Oh, gotta turn on the channel first, huh? That or the really clean, the RC. This. Is it the RC or the EP? I think it's the EP drive. Really clean drive. Yep. You just if you want to get like just the saturation out of these type of pedals, you just bring that gain down. Bring up the master volume. Without it. With it. So it just adds a bit of just a touch of just a little touch of something, you know what I'm saying? Compared to if you use something even like this, what is it? This Blueberry Drive. Turn that tone on 100. See, something like this you can also use in that type of situation. And it just adds just a little something. Let's bring that volume down. And then you just bring that blend down. That's without it, with it. So it just adds just a little bit of saturation on top when you do it like that. So, you know, just using a pedal that has some sort of drive, but bring the drive, the gain all the way down. Just same way on a tube amp, you wouldn't crank the gain unless you wanted to get into the fuzzier territory. You know, it's the same way with these drive pedals and different things like that. So, you know, a lot of times if you want to get a cleaner signal out of something, bring the gain down and bring up the master volume. You know, but yeah, so that's what I'm saying. These amp modelers and stuff have so many options available with them. It's not even just the amps. It's like you got drives, modulations, and all the stuff, all the effects available, filters. You know what I'm saying? All that type of stuff available in different pedals. Versus if you get when you get an amp, you pretty much stuck with that amp sound. Oh, no problem, brother. Appreciate the support. No, the crowd does not care. I've been telling people that forever. First of all, people don't know what's important or not with music. Like, you know what I'm saying? They know we spend the time to learn these things and study them and practice them and everything else. We're responsible for showing people what it is, you know what I'm saying, to do whatever it is that we're trying to get the point across. For instance, like, you know, as bass players, if you some people tell you bass players don't need all these pedals. Some people will tell you, you know, bass players don't need to do all the little chordal stuff and the soloing stuff I do. You know, but you know what I'm saying? You gotta use it the way you gotta do it the way you gotta do it. And then you show them that, nah, this is something different over here. You know, don't let them ever. But yes, the ToneX has the ToneX. You know, the ToneX doesn't have like drives like in a way of like the way you think. And those tone models, they model a drive pedal like. Technically, the color box can be used as a drive pedal. So the same way it modeled the color box and, for instance, the color box and the Ampeg SGT into one tone model, it can do that with an overdrive, fuzz, distortion pedal, and run that into a preamp pedal or a amp head. It'll model all of that, the distortion part and the amp pre-saturation part and all that stuff. It'll model the whole thing. That's what makes that joint so slick. And it don't just model it, it models the gain stage of it. So, for instance, this is what's really impressive about them. I'll get So this is, right, guys? It models that, how the amp reacts to the signal as well. Now I can also clean that up. You know, I actually like that. I'm gonna leave that like that. This setting, where is it? Oh, it's over there. This setting. So I can take this Jens band, the color box. I got the color box pushed with the gain on this, along with the Jens Band Shuttle 9.0, which is a tube, has a tube preamp in it. I have that, both of those gains kind of pushed. And watch how it's able to model like from a good amount of gain to all the way nasty. And even in that, like that harsher part of that distortion is the color box. Like the smoother middle part of that sound. And I don't know if that's making sense to y'all or not. It's just how I hear things. But so like that nastier, grittier part of that is the color box's distortion. But that warmth and like that slight little extra fuzz is the tube from the Jens Band Shuttle 9.0. And I can take this same tone model and clean it up. Clean. Just a little bit of saturation. Yeah, get you a ToneX one, man, and get you the Signature Bass collection. Grab my preset packs. That's going to give you all of that stuff. And the ToneX Signatures pack, that the new one that they came out with, that comes if you just got a pedal, is going to have Dark Glass B7K, a 410 OCD. They got actually several different dark glass ones. I think it's like something is an Omega something, and then something X. What else they had on there? They had quite a few distortion or overdrive pedals modeled on there. Then they have them modeled with different amps as well, so, or full rigs and different things like that. So it's a lot. It's a lot that the ToneX can do, and it's a lot that they added in there that's just crazy. Yeah, it basically, well, it reacts like whatever amp you using in there. That's the crazy part. So if it's I'm sorry, guys, I'm pulling on the camera, lunching. This little loop here is getting on my nerves. Yeah, whatever. Sorry about that. But when it's a really clean amp, it's just gonna be clean. Like there's no way I can distort this other than making the pedal input distort. This color box running into a Aguilar AG, because I had them both with really low gain. So even when they pushed into the gain, it's so much headroom. It just wasn't doing anything but clean. See, it just got that saturation. You can hear that amp, that Aguilar in there. Especially like when you dig in like that. You really can hear that. That's definitely an AG, but still has that firmness from the color box. That's what I'm saying. They did such a good job with the modeling with the ToneX pedals. It's not even close. Like, it's, trust and believe. You just, well, like I said, already, I even went over that. The MS-60B Plus is going to be your best option as a beginner. Or not even a beginner. I wouldn't say a beginner, but anybody that's just getting into effects, the MS-60B Plus is going to give you a little bit of everything. Wow. It still allows you to have those amp models. It allows you to learn how to use everything without having to buy a million pedals. My first pedal, this is my first pedal. I don't know if y'all can see that. This is a Eden WTDI, and it's an analog DI with a compressor built into it and everything. But my very next pedal, this is the very next pedal, the Zoom B3. This is my second pedal, and this did me just fine for a long time. Just fine. It's got amp models. It's only 3 effects at a time. It's got a looper in here. And the thing about having limited amount, this is once I reached a point where I could do everything I was trying to do with this, and I was reaching a point where I couldn't do everything I wanted to do. That's when I started switching to other things. You know what I'm saying? That's when I started, and really this just became part of the pedal board. This was on my pedal board at one point. So all of this, just started forming into my pedal board. But I didn't start out with super expensive pedals. I think this was like 2 something brand new. The Eden was like $150. But you don't have to necessarily start with really expensive multi effects, amp modelers and things like that. That's why I recommend the MS-60B Plus or like Zoom pedals in general for basses, because you're going to get all your effects in there. 90% of them are going to be usable for bass and sound good on bass and sound good together stacked, because they're meant for bass and they don't take all the bottom out your sound like a lot of the guitar versions of the stuff. That's just me. This is why I don't use the Line 6 ones. You know what I'm saying? This is why I don't use the modulations in the Line 6 pedals. They're not, they're guitar modulations. The ones on the Zoom, they took time to tailor those lower frequencies and just make it a nice, rich sounding bass centric unit. Not just a guitar unit. You can use it for bass. Like, don't nobody want that. Who wants to be an afterthought? Or here's 80% guitar, 20% bass. But you pay full price, just like the guitars. But you don't get as much stuff as them. You get 20%. That's not what I like. That's why I don't use a lot of them. But this is going to have everything you need to learn, that you need to learn effects in it, MS-60B Plus, and you can just experiment. And it's 6 effects at a time. You can split the effects. So you can have like part of your dry signal coming out the right side because it comes out stereo. Left side could be wet, right side could be dry. You got plenty of options, and you can learn with an MS-60B Plus. Now you don't get a looper. You get a tuner and all that in there, but you don't get a looper and all that. Now, if you want something with a looper, or like all that in one, I'm trying to think. Does the there's a B2N or B4N, whatever that pedal, the Zoom one is. That might have a looper in it, but I know the Zoom B6 has a 2-hour looper. You know, you can check out that, and that's going to have your amp models and everything else too at a really good, high quality. So the amp models have come such a long way, man, and they have so many extra effects in them these days compared to buying an amp, buying a head. You know, I buy all my amps and heads used now. I don't even buy them brand new. Yeah, the Ditto 2 looper is pretty good. X2 is pretty good. You can do a lot of little stuff with that joint. If you're into TC Electronic, check out the plethora pedals. Excuse me. Plethora is gonna be a little pricier though. But you're gonna get all TC Electronic effects. You know, you got the X1, the X3, and the X5. So, but those don't have amp models. That's why I didn't really recommend those at the moment, because I'm trying to stay with the amp model theme. But amp model, and I actually have another amp model right here, which is the original MS-50G, which models my guitar amps when I need them. The ToneX does guitar amps as well, but I like to use all those slots for bass stuff. But, you can have more than one modeler. That's the other benefit of the modelers. Like, you can carry, 4 or 5 modelers, amp modelers, and you be fine. You're not carrying 4 or 5 amps, bro. Like, who's doing all of that? And why? These people must really be paying that you need that many amps, And like I said, just be mindful that the more options you give yourself too early with the effects and stuff, the more likely you are to either give up on them or never properly learn how to use them, because you're hopping from one thing to the next, instead of focusing on, okay, what is these parts of a chorus, what is the speed knob doing? What is, the resonance doing? What is this or that? That's how you learn how to use effects. And once you learn that on like a multi-effects unit, when you go to buy the individual pedals, you'll know what you're looking at. You'll know what parameters you want, and you'll know if they have an additional parameter that you may need and that you don't have access to right now. It's a lot of little things that you can learn from a multi-effects unit compared to buying individual pedals, especially because you buy this multi-effects unit, you got everything you need right now. You buy something else, and you buy individual effects, you gotta wait till you get all those effects. And generally, we're not buying all of these pedals at once. Nobody's buying 20 pedals at once. Majority of us, we collecting over time because they're expensive. So, I would say just take your time and pick something like MS-60B Plus or something similar that's bass centered. Not an afterthought, is actually in the forefront of the unit, and then go from there. And just experiment with different sounds, different, you can have 2 delays running into a reverb. You can have 2 delays running into 2 reverbs. You can have a delay into a reverb into a filter or a modulation, or opposite, a modulation into delay into reverb, or a delay into modulation into reverb. You got to try all these different combination of effects. Generally, you want like a light compression up front into your amp model, and then maybe like a limiter on there as well, because I like the limiter on these Zoom pedals as well. So the 160 comp, they got an 1176 style limiter in here. That I think it's limiter 76 or limit 76, something like that. And the glam one and the black something, it's black something compressor on there. The glam compressor and the black other one, or the other 2 I like on there. But the 160 one is emulating the DBX 160 compressor. So yeah, you can find a bunch of these Zoom multi-effects units secondhand. Not because they're not good, just because some people were just trying them out, and they, but after a while, you just try different things. So, yeah, you can definitely find these used, and they are sturdy. They work well and they last. Like I said, that unit I just showed y'all, the B3, still works. Like that joint still works. So, don't think that it's gonna be just a you buy it and then you throw it away. No, these effects pedals last. They built to be stepped on by adult men. You know what I'm saying? Big grown men stepping on these pedals, and they meant for that. So, they should hold up as long as people aren't tremendously abusing them. And so that's all I'm gonna do for right now, guys. I definitely appreciate y'all hanging out with me on a Sunday afternoon. You guys could have been doing anything. It's heading into Sunday evening now, but you guys could have been doing anything. But you chose to hang out with me. I appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe. Make sure you following me because I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, getting it in with ambient bass effects mornings. And if you want to follow me on there, you can follow me on all social media at the Bass Negus. You can find all my music at allbasscreations.bandcamp. If you want to support the channel even more, check out Patreon. You can get all my preset packs on there for the MS-60B Plus, MS-70 CDR Plus, 11 different preamp packs for the ToneX stuff. Then you got the Zoom B6 as well. And then you got the Future Impact V4 preset pack and the Enzo X preset packs. So check all that stuff out on the Patreon. If you want to sign up for $1 to $5 a month and just support the channel, I definitely would appreciate it. And I appreciate all my Patreon homies for supporting me. So thank you guys. I will catch you guys next time. It's been a pleasure chatting with y'all and just sharing information with y'all. Make sure if you have any additional questions, you leave them down in the comments below. And definitely, if you haven't already, hit that like and that hype button because you guys don't understand how much that really helps me out. And you guys have been doing a fantastic job, supporting in that way. So thank you very much, and I will catch you guys next